Oh, I'm such an old lady with my sore back.
You are. That extra, being in that extra decade definitely doesn't help, does it?
I think so. You're very quickly in behind me. Anyway, I'm just beginning to feel human again.
Yeah.
It's funny when you get a little nerve or something, isn't it? And
it's desperate. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, but then
back pain we're talking about now.
My drug supplier in here, Brian Farrell, managed to come up with some Voltarol, and then I took them, and then I felt sick. So anyway, here we are, feeling a bit better. And we're going to do a Q&A because we haven't done one of these in a good while. And, you know, again, huge apologies to that really nice guy who got me the Colin bloody Coke bottle that ended up kind of practically forming part of a controlled explosion because security thought that there was somebody trying to, what's that stuff that you'd send people to drink, or it was put in the baby food all those years
ago? I don't know, I was thinking ricin or something like that.
Ricin. Yeah, thought it was ricin. And unfortunately it was a guy who took time out of his working day to drop it in for me in an envelope, and I was going to present you with the Colin bottle.
Yeah.
Which brings us nicely to the first question. Where does Colin buy his jumpers? Colin, is clearly you. And will I try and answer that?
Well, I don't.
I tell you, Colin does not buy his jumpers with me. I have nothing to do with any of his clothes. I would have thought you're a bit of a, do you like those sports shops, JD and all those kind of places? Do you?
Well, it would be actually probably too expensive for me. I'm more likely to be. I'm not going to name.
You like a good primary colour, don't you?
I like a black.
You like a black. You like a red.
I like a plain.
Like a sort of a forest green.
Yeah, I like a plain colour.
Yeah,
nothing too exciting. Never any sort of patterns or.
Sometimes we have a few logos on the
tiny, but not massive.
Not massive.
Not massive, and I've been so beaten down because you know what I do when. From you, like
you do get an awful time. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not from the public, like
no.
But, so obviously, but because I mean, anytime I veer from my standard fashion choices, it gets commented on.
Well, I did put you out of those greys because, as I said to you, they did nothing for you because your hair is grey, so it's just washing you out.
What else should I wear? I'll try and mix it up now.
You should never wear a shirt or anything.
I'm going to start wearing one of my 3 shirts now.
Okay.
And wait till you see.
Right, we'll see what the big difference is.
Big event.
Where does Colin buy his shirts?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I'll do one here now.
Go on then.
Because it's an interesting question and it's asking for our opinion.
Oh.
So, what's your opinion on Brian Meehan walking around Crumlin on day release? Now, Brian Meehan obviously has served or is serving a life sentence for the murder of Veronica Guerin. I don't know exactly how many years it is, but he's one of Ireland's longest serving prisoners. He's approaching the 30.
Well, let's try work it out. So she was murdered in 1996.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much swept up, the Gilligan gang, pretty quickly. From memory, John Gilligan was returned to Ireland from Belmarsh jail in the UK. He had been extradited from there. And he came back. He was the last home from memory. But Meehan would have been arrested within about a year, or certainly in custody within June 96, 6 months of that. I'm going to say he was in custody from 97.
97.
So then can you do the calculations?
Well, it's
18 years?
No, it would be 28 years. So
sorry.
Yeah.
So how the hell did I do that?
By missing a decade.
Story of my life.
Yeah, story of your life. Well, look, I mean, it says here, and one of them, he's 26 years. So it's somewhere.
That's really big.
Maybe 27. So it's somewhere in or around then, depending on when he first went into prison. So the average life sentence served by prisoners has changed. It used to be actually 14 years, but it constantly rises. So now I think the most recent figures it was somewhere between 17 and 19. Now, obviously, when people are released, they remain on license. So Brian Meehan will be in the higher bracket.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And the reason the question is being asked is that there was pictures emerged this recent days of him going around Crumlin unaccompanied.
Yeah.
You know.
So your opinion on it is more than just to tell the story about it, I suppose, because that story is online and that's a fact. Opinion. on it. I have to say, and maybe I have slightly matured and mellowed over the years. I mean, obviously, Veronica Guerin, and I wouldn't have known Veronica, I don't think you did either.
No.
It was an attack on one of our own. I suppose other organisations would feel the same way. If a guard is murdered or anything, you see a huge outpouring of support on that. But I do think at 28 years in jail, I think people have to be allowed, having served their sentence and done their time, return to a community. Now, Brian Meehan is still, I'm going to say, a young man in his 50s.
Well, he's 57, I think it's
okay.
Yeah.
In his late 50s.
Yeah.
So, but he's a youngish enough guy. He still has some life to live. He was the only one that was convicted for murder in that case. And I think that things might have been different if that grouping were put before the courts nowadays. We've seen the courts are able to consider somebody guilty of murder without them pulling the trigger.
Well, definitely the new anti-gangland laws have allowed the existence and the knowledge of a criminal organisation to be factored into the cases brought.
Yeah. So I think that probably if the Gilligan gang had existed in more recent times and done what they did, I think there'd be more than Brian Meehan serving life for murder. I think it would have been probably easier provable as a conspiracy between phones, etc., etc. I don't particularly like seeing these people out having fun, but I suppose you have to understand that they have served their time. And I'm sure Veronica Guerin's family and friends won't agree with that, and they believe, and many people do, that life should be life. But to be locked up for 28 years, to be denied your liberty for that long, is a huge amount of punishment. And I can't even recall, did Brian Meehan have children? Did he? Was he?
He did have children.
Yeah. So I always think that must be such a loss to you. You're gone for your children's entire sort of rearing into their teenage years on into their adult years. Some of these people miss their grandchildren's arrival. They miss forming those bonds with them. There is a lot taken from you when your liberty is taken.
Yeah. I think Veronica Guerin's family have spoken. Her brother Jimmy has spoken at times. In particular, he has spoken about how he feels they're not being informed, because Brian Meehan, he's out unaccompanied now at this point, but he will have had build-ups to that, so he would have been accompanied at some point. He may have, initially prisoners are sometimes allowed meet in churches, family, so they before they're allowed unaccompanied, they tend to have a number of meetings. So they've spoken about that, and nobody can deny a family in those circumstances are entitled to say life should mean life. I mean, that is their opinion. I'm not actually sure if that is Jimmy Guerin's opinion, but so yeah, it's a complicated question. An opinion is that, rehabilitation is part of our justice system, I suppose. That is the case. Brian Meehan certainly initially was not a model prisoner. For the first decade of his imprisonment, he was very much not of that type. But in recent years, according to all the reports that we've received, that there has been a change there. But yeah, I suppose it comes down to the fact that if we want rehabilitation to be part of our prison system, then we have to accept tough cases in that as well, where people that commit horrendous crimes, maybe crimes against women, against any sort of vulnerable person. And while Veronica Guerin was not a vulnerable person, she was certainly performing a duty for the country. But no matter who you are, you have to either accept rehabilitation as part of the system, or you go to a system like the US where they don't allow people out and they do still carry out executions.
Yeah, exactly. You have to take the good with the bad in this, and we do have quite a democratic system of punishment that has changed over the centuries. I mean, there was a time, if you even actually go, if you have a day, anybody to go to the likes of Wicklow Jail and have a look at the conditions people used to be held in. And prior to the building of jails, we used to house prisoners on ships out at sea, rat infested, disease infested, and, make them basically do unnecessary hard labour all day.
I mean,
so we have changed. We do have this attitude to crime and the punishment of crime, that taking somebody's liberty and that alone is punishment. And yeah, it is. I mean, I often think about that. Imagine you couldn't go down the shop when you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously in the case of Veronica Guerin, the counter argument is that he comes out at 57, he looks healthy and well in those pictures, and he's able to get on with his life, and her family have been denied that, no matter what the passage of time. And that's a totally and utterly valid argument. But you know, we are. I suppose when you look at the US, it's a clear choice, and it's a choice that the Irish public have not made, I suppose.
There's a question here, actually, speaking of the US, that I'm kind of reluctant to even go there, because
I bet you I know what this one is. Go on.
Don't even say his name.
Go on.
Because you get blocked on social media, don't you?
Well, I don't know if that's the case, but
well, you said but you did. You said you couldn't get the thing.
No, but that's because there's different ways. But just ask the question, because you're actually okay.
I'm not. I'm going to ask a different question.
Okay.
I'm going to just say, somebody has written and asked, can you do a regular slot about the gangsters' malls?
Yeah.
That's like, it's always an interesting kind of position to have a look at the women behind these men, and, you know, the lifestyle and their attitudes and what makes them tick.
Yeah. Now, some of the reason that we have done some of the girlfriends of criminal figures, for example, we mentioned the partner of Kieran Keane Jr., Laura Flanagan, recently. But we tend not to just pick them out of nowhere. We spoke about her because she was a respondent in a cab case. Now, she's not expected of involvement in criminality, but she obviously shared assets with her partner, and they came under the focus of the Criminal Assets Bureau. Similarly, Kiva Robinson, Daniel Kinahan's partner, we wrote about her recently, or we did a podcast on her recently, because of the properties that are in her name in Dubai.
And the UK media took a really big interest in Joanne Byrne of late, who's the wife of Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. And you don't really see the UK media going too mad for crime stories or for sort of focusing on individuals. But she seems to have really made her name over there. And as we said, there's a proceeds of crime case coming up in relation to a lot of the lifestyle around them. So we'll be doing a podcast about that. A regular slot sounds a little bit like a soap opera.
Well, it does. And there is a soap opera aspect to some of these people's lives. There is, people like to hear about the girlfriends, I think, because they, you know, there's a kind of a moral ambiguity there. I mean, if you're with somebody, and not talking about anybody in particular, but if you're going out with a criminal, and while you're not maybe involved in murder plots or selling drugs,
you're actually talking about me there.
If one was, one was. I don't. Better. I'm pretty sure you're not.
I was looking at you going, "Where's he going with this?"
That would be a really good.
And then you were
story.
talking about not naming anyone in particular. I was like,
well, that would be a really good story. But so people look at that and think, well, you know, that person knows something is going on, that woman. And I think there is an interest there. Like, you know, how did they justify it? How do they feel about it themselves? All of the great gangster films have had, you know, many of them have had great female characters, haven't they? In the background, living that. And if you remember Carmela Soprano, who was, you know, involved in the local church and the community.
Yeah, just able to get on with it and to sort of just turn a blind eye.
But willfully turning a blind eye, like knowing but not knowing enough. And I think that's some of the interest in the women. Now there's some of them that have stepped over the line and have become active participants, but a lot of them I think are you know,
active spenders.
Yeah. And certainly living off the proceeds.
I remember a very good detective I used to talk to many years ago always reckoned that he always said that the women have all the secrets.
Yeah.
They hear everything.
Yeah.
They know everything. And they can be so dangerous to the man. You know, you always sort of think women in these relationships are probably subjected to some violence. They have to put up with usually there's a couple of women on the go as well, maybe holed up in apartments or something like that. And they have to put up with that. But actually they're, what do they say? More deadly than the
female of the species is more deadly than the male. Certainly, though, the level of domestic violence in the criminal underworld is quite shocking. And that is one thing that doesn't always get reported on, because these issues, a lot of them are family law. But it would never cease to amaze you, the amount of domestic violence. I mean, it is really, really, you know, really common. And we've been told about people that are involved in crime. I've remember some detective speaking to somebody saying he's going to kill her someday.
Yeah, because literally they get such a bad beating and then they won't come forward. And
also it's very hard for people. A lot of times you see in gangster films, you see the gangster with a heart of gold at home. And some of these guys can be great fathers, and some of them presumably are great partners as well. But it's very hard to turn off and on violence like a tap, that you can be violent on the street and then go home and be like a Darren in Love Hate, a soft, sensitive, poetic type at home.
Compartmentalization, I think it's called.
Yeah, it doesn't happen easily.
To change the subject slightly, because I have been dipping in and out of this, so I don't know if you... Somebody's asking, can we do an episode on the mushroom murder trial in Australia? What is it about that story that has captured the imagination of people across the world? So the mushroom murder trial in Australia centres on a woman who had her, I think it was her in-laws. She was separated from the husband and she had her in-laws basically over for dinner for Sunday lunch.
Beef Wellington,
yeah. And went to a lot of trouble to make the beef Wellington, but apparently, and according to, and she's been found guilty now, according to the state of Australia, she had basically gone out and picked these death cap mushrooms, put them into the pasty stuff that you put around. Have you ever made a beef Wellington?
I haven't. I'm not even sure what it is, to be honest.
Oh no, seriously, you know what a beef Wellington is, do you not?
No.
So you get a fillet of beef, like as good as a cut you can, and you make up this kind of mushroom pate.
Right.
And then you spread it all around the beef.
Yeah.
And then you roll that in phyllo pastry and you cook it.
Right.
Salmon Wellington, which is a bit of a thing on that again, is a fillet of salmon, but mostly with a creamed sort of a leek creamy sauce, and with
never had it. It just was probably more of a South County Dublin thing, was it?
Or more of a pasta pesto man?
Well, I mean a pasta pesto, but growing up, no, I never had a
beef Wellington.
No, but anyway,
very heavy anyway, and something that you would have to go through a lot of trouble to make, to purchase the ingredients for, and to then serve up. But I mean, this was a fascinating. There was one of those podcasts that followed the trial on, and I was listening to for a little while. I'd love to know what people think about these ones actually, because I think if you miss a day, you're just screwed with those, and you don't know where to go back to or where to start, and you can't dip around them because they're covering the court case. It's not so easy to see, even on the title sometimes. I think they need to put day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, or whatever. Now, what I liked about the one I was listening to was, and I sort of thought we'll learn from that ourselves, they did do a weekly wrap up.
Yeah.
Which is great, because if you don't have time to listen to the whole 5 days or 4 days of evidence, you can do. So for the next trial we cover, we should do that, the day to day, and then the weekly wrap up. Maybe we were doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is good. But I mean, I suppose the centre of the case was that she said she did it by accident. And I think there was a few bits of it that really probably stood out. Like she claimed she invited all her in-laws around, or former in-laws around, and her husband
didn't
dropped out at the last moment, I think. And
he was her ex-husband.
Yeah. So this is all. So I think she claimed to have had cancer, wasn't it?
Yes, and she didn't. She lied to them. This was what she was having them for lunch for, to tell them this kind of thing.
Yeah,
but that wasn't true. There was a survivor. Certainly one, if not two, of the people survived. Maybe 3 died and 1 survived. But anyway, what is it? We've spoken about this when it comes to trials. Is it that it's that sort of, it's the risk that they could walk or they could get put away? It's the unknown, isn't it?
Well,
you're listening to the evidence, and some trials, even when they go to trial, everybody knows damn well this person's going to get found guilty of something.
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Satchwell, a case in point.
Yeah.
And we did cover that. Eamon Dillon covered that case for us. But that was a murder trial. And really the kind of the jeopardy there for him
it's gone.
Was that he was going to get found guilty of manslaughter instead of murder, should the jury not have been able to come to agreement on the murder verdict. they perhaps would have been offered manslaughter. But you kind of knew he was going down for something, and it was pretty obvious that he had killed her and buried his wife.
Yeah, because he'd said it himself at the time, and this is the funny thing about that case, he pled not guilty, but, you know, some of the evidence was, I did it, he told police, like, you know, so the jeopardy wasn't there. But a case like this mushroom case, you know, there's a plausible sort of case that she's put forward. I picked them by accident, and Duval died.
She didn't even say she picked them, I think. She just didn't really know where they came from, as far as I remember. Now, maybe you listened to more than I did, but she'd gone to the supermarket and she bought all these mushrooms. And it was little things interesting in the case. Like, for example, she had this, she probably did pick them, the ones that she used, but she also they found receipts that showed that she'd already bought a load of mushrooms in the supermarket that week. Anyway, so didn't need to go out and pick. So it was all this sort of jeopardy type of
but I mean, thing. As in, there's a plausible case for her to be found not guilty, certainly on a surface reading. Do people find it interesting because they've often thought, well, I wouldn't mind killing my own in-laws. How would I get away with it?
Poisoning is something that doesn't come up very often these days. It used to be obviously a very popular way of killing people, but, you know, you don't see it so much nowadays, and I think that made it interesting. And maybe it was the fact that it was a mushroom, you know, something that
I think it's a deeply personal sort of killing as well. I think that does interest people. Like, she obviously had...
The motive never seemed to be clear in it. I know they've proved their case and she's been found guilty. Some of the podcasts I was listening to on it had a, you know, kind of court reporters were discussing that it was very tragic, actually, the whole case, apart from it being this sort of, you know, the eyes of the world on it, that she had 2 young children.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, they had lost their grandparents and they had... obviously now lost their mother. The question was, why would you kill these really kind, your children's really kind grandparents? But no motive really.
Well, we don't know what the motive is, but you'd have to imagine it's something to do with the family breakdown and all of that. That can interest people. Like, how would I, you know, people feel hurt.
Don't talk yourself too far into this, by the way.
Yeah. Why?
Because you're going to end up saying that you're going to murder someone.
No, I'm not. But
Are you not?
No, I don't think so. No, I'm not the type. But I think it's more that people feel these big passions when things happen in their lives, and they think people have, you know, concepts of ideas of revenge maybe pop into their head when they get, you know, if they get fired from a job or whatever, they think, I'd love to go in and do this. Whereas when somebody actually goes and then acts on that revenge fantasy, because a revenge fantasy is a very sort of normal thing, but somebody to actually do it, to sit down, carefully plan it, heartlessly carry it out.
This woman had a really good relationship with her in-laws, even though they were ex.
Exactly.
They were kind to her and they were great to her kids and everything. It was really that the motive thing was completely missing from it. Which is maybe why we're still discussing it.
Maybe why.
You know? But there are those little things that and the question was, can you do an episode?
Well, we might.
We will.
Yes,
we'll go and find somebody that has covered this trial and can maybe answer some of this stuff for us. And, you know, anybody who's really interested in it, just go into the podcasts app and you'll find plenty of coverage from our really good Australian media out there.
Okay, I'll ask one here now.
Go on.
Why does Cork escape a lot of gangland violence when there is so much drug supply there?
I saw that question and I found it interesting, and I've asked it so much myself over the years. There has always been a good bit of sort of subversive activity around Cork.
Absolutely.
But there's not a huge amount, and we don't want to put the kibosh on anything.
No.
There hasn't been one of these sort of murderous feuds.
No. Well, I mean, I think if you look at Cork, if you compare it to Dublin or Limerick, I mean, I think there was 50 gangland murders in Limerick over a couple of decades. And in Cork, you're talking about 3 or 4. We had one very recently, a cab case came to court 14 years after the murder of a guy called Darren Falsey. And I couldn't think of another murder of that type. He was suspected of being involved in drugs and was assassinated. And it is an interesting question why Cork has escaped it. I do think some of that is true, that the IRA in its various forms held a much bigger oversight on the criminal underworld in Cork. I do think as well, a lot of what happened in Dublin, the fallout happened, the explosion in Gangland, it came really a decade after the heroin epidemic in Dublin. The heroin epidemic had a huge impact in the inner city in particular, leading to the breakdown of family units. So the children of people who were involved, who suffered heroin addiction, maybe died or had their lives destroyed. Their kids grew up, and it caused a lot of social chaos. And I think gangland crime, certainly some of that emerged out of that. Now, Cork never had that to the same extent. Also, there was a few gentlemen drug dealers around Cork City as well, which was an interesting sort of phenomenon.
Unusual characters for some reason.
Yeah.
Around that region in the criminal underworld. Of course, there was the Penguin George Mitchell's Munster Mafia. Do you remember those guys?
Yeah.
Alan Bailey and others that kind of fled Cork at a time that Mitchell moved on out towards Amsterdam. There was one guy was murdered in Portugal and dumped in a freezer.
Yeah.
There was another guy that basically settled in Spain. They kind of moved out. They were some of the first drug dealers to migrate out of Ireland, to Spanish Costa and Portugal and places like that. But there's so many interesting characters around that part of the country. So much activity, of course, because of the coastline and all the rest of it. And it's almost like it's a little place where there is this unwritten agreement that don't do murder because it's bad for business.
Yeah, well,
there is this sort of chaotic thing in Dublin and sometimes in Limerick where the gangs are too young, or they don't have a mentor, or they.
Well, if you look back to Limerick and when the feuding began back in the 90s, like a lot of the players, they're still the same 30 years later. It's carried on through the generations. Sometimes the feuds break down or get restart or go into these sub-feuds or different contexts. But there hasn't been that generational wars in Cork for sure. And if there hadn't been a number of shootings back in the 90s, maybe it wouldn't have happened in Limerick either. There's no doubt there's loads of complicated reasons for it, but it is an interesting phenomenon.
And listen, there's as much drug intimidation and drug use and availability of it in the region as there is anywhere else around the country. Before anybody thinks that we're being naive about it, it's just that violence, that feuding, the control of that drug supply, all will be tied up in, as you say, complicated and varied reasons. But
also the Limerick gangs really did feed a lot of Cork, and they come in and out. And there's constantly people driving down. We had a few stories about different people, some of them from Moyross area, driving down to Cork like a job every day. So they kind of retained an oversight as well, interesting one.
Interesting question, yeah. And it's why there's no more. There hasn't been for decades a Cork correspondent. There used to be on the paper. But anyway. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.